Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography.
Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes. Welcome back once again to another episode of The Art of Photography. Today we're going to do a little darkroom tour, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to build a darkroom and set it up in your very own home. Right now we are on the illustrious location of my very own bathroom in my apartment, and what I want to do is show you how I've kind of converted this into a darkroom. Now what's cool about this is that it doesn't require a lot of stuff, and that's what I want to communicate today. So if you live with other family members, roommates, things like that, and you need it to still function as a bathroom and not have chemicals and things in the way, then that's fine. What you want to do is streamline your darkroom to where you can kind of put that stuff away and get it out of sight when you don't need it, but bring it out and use it when you do.
The main challenges in building a darkroom are safety and space management. I store all of my chemicals in protected containers designed for holding liquids. All of my tools are stored on shelves that I built to keep things up and out of the way. Chemicals are all stored below the sink. If you're making a darkroom like we are today, you'll want a clear and stable working space. I use a laundry station. For the lamp in this case, I'll be using a work light fitted with the red safety bulb. You can get these online from just about any darkroom supplier for just a few dollars. The first step in working in the darkroom is your prep. Much like cooking, you'll want to have everything set up and ready to go. This promotes safety and it makes your work easier when you're ready to develop. I use plastic trays large enough to fit an 8x10 sheet of paper in comfortably. I'll also use colored trays, so each chemical is always mixed in the same tray. This keeps dry chemical residue from mixing with something that it shouldn't. First, I'll mix the developer. Ilford paper developer must be diluted 1 part developer and 9 parts water. I measure this out to 100 milliliters of developer and 900 milliliters of distilled water. Next, I'll pour in the pre-mixed stop bath, and I'll follow this by pouring in the fixer. A fourth tray is fitted with water and acts as a holding tank before the rinse, so that I can work on mini prints in just one session. They're all rinsed together when I'm through. After your prep is finished, you can now start working on your photograms.
Okay, so before I turn out the lights typically, and the lights will be on at this point, I will use just a regular sheet of notebook paper or some kind of white paper, printer paper, something like that, because all I'm trying to do is get my composition set. And let's say I'm going to photograph my watch, I would put it down and kind of get a feel for what you want the actual photogram to look like. Experiment, use your eye. This is the camera part of this, okay, because you don't actually have a camera you're using for a photogram. And so this is where you kind of want to experiment. So kind of once you have learned what you want to do compositionally on here, then it's time to actually turn out the lights and get ready to shoot it. I want to show you some basic techniques that you can do here. More or less what's going to happen is if you put a flat object down, it covers that space from being lit when I turn on the light. So everything else will turn black, except once the object is lifted, that area is left unexposed, it will remain white. That's more or less how it works. Okay, so really the only control you're going to have light-wise on here is you can get away with doing some shading. And this works better with things like plants or things that aren't flat specifically. But what you're going to realize is flat objects will create a real high contrast dark edge. You can actually get a little bit of depth of field in here and a little bit of blur by making sure some of it sticks up. And you can tell when you see a shadow on a piece of paper. And you can kind of tell here just even with this light. Like the further I pull it, the more blurred the shadow gets. Look at the shadow and not the watch. The closer I get, the more defined the shadow gets. And that shows up in your photogram as well. So that's really about the only technique that you're going to have with something like this, just on this basic level like we're talking about. Okay, so we have our subject composed, we're prepared, we're ready to go. I want to talk about paper really quick, and this is the part of the episode that we're going to have to simulate a little bit. Right now, before you pull your paper out of the box, the lights must be out, because if your paper hits the light, it will ruin it. It will expose all the silver on there and you won't be able to print on top of it, so it's very important to understand. The paper that I'm using here is just Ilford 8x10. You don't have to spend a lot of money on paper. In fact, I would not if you're making photograms. You're not dealing with enough shades of gray and contrast and things like that. It's a real hard contrast, black and white. And so I just don't see the reason, especially if you're starting out, to spend money on expensive paper. This right here, if you must know, is Ilford Multigrade 4 RC Deluxe. And it's just a nice photo paper. I like using it. Ilford make really good stuff. The chemicals I'm using are generally all Ilford. I like to use Ilford film even when I'm using a camera. But anyway, what you're going to do is this is a package package that I bought that will hold, well, it comes with 25 sheets and they're 8x10 in size. So quick note about size. What you need to understand is that the smaller your darkroom, unfortunately, is going to restrict you on how big you can work. So my darkroom, you saw my trays over there. I'm really, because you have 4 trays to manage and they need to be somewhere, and preferably not on the floor because it's dirty or dusty, or if you have pets. Really 8x10 and smaller are the sizes. So it's 8x10 inches or smaller is what I can do. Typically with Photograms, it's not a big deal. I don't need to go 16x22 or something like that. In fact, 8x10 is a little big. So a lot of times what I will do is I'll go ahead and pull a sheet out of here that I'm ready to use. Remember to put your unused sheets back in. They must be in here because later on you're going to turn on the light, and if you forget they're out, they're gone. But anyway, I'll pull out the one sheet that I'm going to use, and you can use a paper cutter if you want it to be exact. I don't. I just eyeball it with a pair of scissors, and I'll cut 4 smaller sheets out of that. So that's what we're going to do today, because I'm going to make a photogram with my watch, and so it doesn't need all that negative space on an 8x10. It's just too big. So I'm actually going to use smaller sheets of paper when I do that. So anyway, that's the quick word about lighting. Just make sure at this point in the podcast, when you're ready to take the light out, that you turn the lights out. You can have your safe light on as long as it's away from where you're working. And then I'm not actually going to pull this out because I've got the paper I want to use in here. But when you pull this out, just a little bit of the package, it's like a big hefty bag that the paper's actually in. You pull that all the way out and there's a flap, and then you pull the flap open and you can get to your paper. Again, remember to put it back in, the stuff you're not using. The only sheet of paper that should be out when you're ready to print is the one you're working with. So if that becomes cumbersome, you might consider buying a plastic paper safe or something like that. A light tight box is all that is. So anyway, when you pull it out, and I'm going to use an example of a photogram I already did. This is one from the last episode. This is the fork. When you pull it out, it's in the dark. Only one side of this paper is light sensitive. Okay, so what you're going to do is pull that out, and it's too dim to actually see what you're doing on this. But you might try just blowing one just so you can get a feel for it. But the emulsion side, which is the side that's going to take the print, that's where the emulsion is, the stuff that otherwise is just paper. It has a little bit of a sheen to it, and you can feel it with your hands. If your hands get wet, it's harder to feel. So make sure that you have some towels and you're able to dry your hands and keep them that way. But anyway, you'll want to kind of feel for that, and you'll learn it's a little bit smoother on the top side, and that's the side that you're going to print on. So make sure it's face up. They actually kind of come out of the package face down, again, just to protect from light leaks and things like that. But anyway, that's what you're working with. Once you figure out which side is the emulsion side, just put it down. You're ready to go. If you get no print, you printed on the wrong side. So really be conscious of that. Okay, so at this point, I would be ready to print. So what we would do is actually turn out the lights, and I will do this so you can actually see a finished result here. But you're actually going to turn out the lights and go ahead and put your paper down, put the rest of the paper away. And you basically have 2 options if you're not going to use an enlarger or some kind of contained light source. I use this little work lamp. It's got a red safety light. You're going to have to experiment a little bit. I know that that'll give me between 15 and 30 seconds for a good solid black background. Okay, so if I don't want the background to go totally black. If I'm working with plants or something that have a little more blur to them, what I'll do is I'll cut that back. So I'll cut it down to 5 seconds, 10 seconds, somewhere in there. Sometimes you may have to make a few prints to get your timing down. The other option you can have is you can blast it with a flashlight. And if you do it literally, and I don't have my flashlight with me, but you turn it on, I turn it on in the palm of my hand, and I'll pull it up just over the paper, and I'll literally go up, up. Okay, so you pull it out and go right back. So that's how fast you would do it, because the light is so bright on that, and you're going to have very little control over grays and things like that. What you can do is use it to move, and you might be able to get a blur going, something like that. The whole idea here is to experiment. But anyway, we've made our print, and now I want to show you what happens when it's time to put in the chemicals. The lights must remain off, and obviously in this podcast I can't do that, so they're going to be on right now. But this would be a dark area, so I'm going to go ahead and what we're going to do is just expose a piece of paper, and I'm going to show you how it develops. Okay, so remember, our lights are still out here. What we're going to do is we've made the print, just handle it by the edges, and we're ready to put this in the developer. Now we're in the light here, so what this is a piece of photosensitive paper, so when we put this in the developer it's just going to turn black. But it's really simple what you do. Basically you just stick it in the developer, put it down like that, and then what I do is just start to agitate slightly by pulling the edge up, and you're going to see what happens very quickly as our exposed paper turns black. What we're going to do is just take the tongs, just grab it gently like that, and drain it off a little bit. Now remember, you don't want to get too much of these chemical solutions in the others. You can go from the developer to the fixer, or from the fixer to the stop, but you don't want to drip back the other way. If stop bath gets in the developer, you're done. It won't work. So what I'll do is just probably take this with my hands and go ahead and drop it in the fixer, or excuse me, the stop bath. And I'll go ahead here. Now the development takes generally, for a good exposure, about 2 minutes. I would leave it in, give or take. Your time may vary once again. And in the stop bath, I would do about 30 seconds. I kind of eyeball these when they're not mission critical prints, but you could use the Darkroom timer up here too, if you so desired. And once you're done in the stop bath, you can simply, drip it off. And again, remember, don't get chemicals mixed in with one another. Again, it's okay. The paper obviously has stop bath all over it, which has killed the developer. I wouldn't want to go back into the developer. It will kill the developer and I'll have to remix it. But you can go, in this case, from left to right. I will go ahead and bring it in here, and this is the fixer. Once it's been in here about a minute, you can turn on the lights. So once you hit the fixer, let it sit for 1 minute just to make sure there's nothing light sensitive still going on. Then you can go ahead and turn on the light. And then finally, the last thing I will do is I will bring it over and put it in the water. Bring it up like so. Go ahead and let it drain off. Get the excess chemical off. Then what I'll do is go ahead and put the sponge underneath or a paper towel, come out in front, and then go into the rinse. So typically what I'll do is I'll leave these in the wash, and I'll go ahead and do another print at this point. It doesn't matter whether the lights are on or off. This is good to go. It's just going to rinse. This is not an active rinse. This is just a tub filled with water. So what you would actually want to do, I'll let them stack up here. If you were doing mission critical gallery work, something like that, you would probably want to invest in a print washer, and you can kind of make one out of stuff for around $30 to $60 depending on what you want. You can also spend several hundred if you want on a big plexiglass fish tank looking thing. You don't need to, obviously. But anyway, once again, what I will do is I'll typically collect these here, and then when I'm done, I will actually move my trays, clean up my chemicals, and I'll put this in the sink and go ahead and get a running rinse going for 15 minutes or so. Okay, so that's it. That's really all there is to Darkroom. This is how simple it is. At this point, what we need to do is go ahead and clean up the chemicals, get them put away. The next person who comes in here never even know we did printing. So it really is that easy to do, and it's easy to set up in your home. The only things to remember is just to have fun, experiment, and be careful about whether the lights are on or off, because this podcast probably did a poor job of trying to describe whether it was supposed to be dark or light. But anyway, basically when things are light sensitive, the lights need to be out except for your safe light until they get into the chemicals, get into the fixer, then the lights can come back on. So typically I'll do one print at a time before it's time to rinse. So anyway, it's been the Art of Photography once again. Hope that you found this useful, and thank you again for watching.